Welcome to everybody to this meeting. We've had Comrade Aman speaking to us several times over the last few years about the developing struggle in Iran. We've heard from him about the huge strike wave that took place 2 or 3 years ago. We saw some very exciting videos of factory gate meetings. We heard from him later during the inspiring women's movement against the medieval theocratic rules of the ruling regime. And we heard from him at the beginning of the outbreak of the horrific wars and the extermination of the Palestinian population of Gaza and the attacks on Iran. Now we have a situation where I would imagine we'll hear from Comrade Aman that the balance of forces may be temporarily dipped in a different direction. There was a horrific attack of the bombing raids on Tehran and a big wave of repression by the regime. I think what we're all very much thirsting to hear from Comrade Aman is the mood and the resilience of the population of Iran. What do you think the balance of forces are now, and what are the perspectives for the future of the revolutionary process? So I'll hand over straight away now to Comrade Aman. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Roger, and good afternoon to you, everybody. Well, good evening if you're a little bit further away. The situation that we are seeing now is after the so-called 12-day war. Interestingly enough, it's very, perhaps sometimes easy to just have one situation as one war and have one solution to any war. But sadly, that doesn't work. It's not possible to just have one war and therefore all wars are different. Not necessarily, but a lot of times they're different to one another. And therefore the policies and obviously the main focus at any one stage would have to change. When you look at the situation of the recent war that took place and was about 12 days, some said, oh, Iran had a war with Iraq for over 8 years with over 1 million dead through that war and through that period. And then you could look at the war that took place as the Gulf War or the war that is taking place in Gaza. All of these are wars, but obviously the focus of each one is different. So one way of recognizing each war is to find out what is generally said is the violent continuation of previous policies in a different manner. Recognize what are the reasons for this war, how it came about, and at the same time recognize the main issues that have come during this war, and therefore what should be the main policies that socialists and working class should adopt accordingly. There is one thing to bear in mind, and that is insofar as the recent war of the 12 days took place, it's impossible to actually talk about this war without looking at the whole Middle East. The situation that Israel is in, the isolation that it feels, the escalation of the war to Gaza, from Gaza to Lebanon, from Lebanon to Syria, and then to Iran and all the rest, and the situation that Israel is in on one hand, and what they actually had termed, or what Netanyahu had termed, as the new Middle East order, along rhyming with the new order that George Bush, if you remember, brought out when he was talking about the Gulf War. And the idea was that the reason effectively was given as the issue of nuclear, or what is termed as the nuclearization, if you like, of Iran and its attempt of the Islamic Republic to find atomic bombs And therefore, given the policies of Iran, of the Islamic Republic of Iran, therefore Israel has no choice but to go over and effectively break down this situation completely and change the whole scenario. This was the rhetoric that we heard a lot about from Netanyahu, and I think probably in majority of cases, if you look at the official media, followed on the same pattern. And they made it sound as if the issue was the issue of nuclears and nuclear or atomic bomb, if you like, of Iran. And everybody knew that that is not really the main issue. This was effectively one of those red herring which was brought out, like the weapons of mass destruction of Saddam Hussein at the time when the Gulf War was going on. So the rhetoric was very much similar to that time. Not only the name of the new Middle East order, but also the rhetoric was very similar to that era. The situation of Israel, and obviously the question that we had always was that not the case of the issue is that of the nuclear issue of Iran, but the issue was mostly acceptance of the, if you like, the gendarme role of Israel and the issue of nuclear power that Israel has. That was the main issue, and nobody else was supposed to have in that region any form of, or any means of actually having something similar. The idea was to make sure that Israel, and at the moment, as we all know, the situation of Netanyahu's government, the continuation of war and further escalation of the war as the only means of it staying in power to a large extent and pursuing this policy and forcing the rest of the countries, even the reactionary states in the Gulf and the rest of the Middle East, to follow and recognize Israel as the only force that can do anything it wants without any impunity, and it can carry on doing so for as long as it wants and being effectively the main, if you like, military power and the main decider in the whole Middle East. This was not going to work. The situation, or if you like, the turnout during the attack and after the attack on Iran by Israel showed that that is not going to actually work. The position, if you like, or the ability and the power base have shifted massively since the early 90s, where we had the first Gulf War. The situation in each of the countries in the region is very much different to what it was. The situation in Iran, obviously, is very different. And the position of Israel is very, very different to what it was before. And we all saw how the regional powers from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and if you go further down the line towards Jordan and all the rest, they were all trying to actually say something that if there is any war, and if the war does escalate towards Iran, the whole situation of the Middle East would be in a different, unknown fate. And this fate is something that they cannot decide. It wasn't just because of what the Islamic Republic can do, which I would come back a little bit later to, but it was the whole region and the positions which are very different to what it was before. We saw the first instances that US in particular had to give in to the states in the region. And one of the first signs of that was under the, if you like, the guise of bringing Syria to the Abraham Accord. And the idea was allowing, or if you like, loosening the embargo that they had and giving the free reins to Saudi Arabia as one of the advantageous points, if you like, to the region in terms of the positions that they have and the expectations that they have. Most of the states in the region are not looking for further militarization, not militarization, but further, if you like, instability in the region. And all of them have set up their future based on some way of actually improving their own position. The bourgeoisie in all of these countries is in not the same position that it was before. It is in a very much, if you like, underhanded position from the point of view of the expectations of the general population in the region. And this situation of further war and further instability and not knowing what would be the outcome was something that none of them wanted. And this was shown clearly by a variety of the heads of the states and their spokespeople in the region saying that they do not want to see a further escalation of this war towards Iran. And Israel attack was therefore this time very clearly stated, started with the first rhetoric of the issue of nuclear, but very soon it became clear and publicly said by Netanyahu and a variety of his ministers that what they want is a change of government, a regime change in Iran. And that was their intention. The attack was orchestrated. It covered a variety of areas. The bombing went across many different cities, from the south, from the west mostly, north, and also part of east of Iran. But the whole idea was to try and actually do two things. The initial idea was to kill some of the heads of the military, but it wasn't just a case of direct sort of sniper attack. It was a case of bombings. And it went further to the infrastructure. It even included the bombing of the notorious Evin prison in Iran and the killing of some of the people who were even in the area and not just the prison. And it went on further and further, like blowing up the fuel tanks that people were going to use later on, etc. Everything was supposed to create a chaos. And this chaos was supposed to have opened up the ground for a handover from the part of the bourgeois opposition, if you like, mostly from the right wing in Iran and their contacts inside Iran, to actually be able to force a regime change. Everybody knew from advance that the regime change would not take place through bombings. That would not happen. Everybody knew that the Islamic Republic is also very different to Saddam Hussein's regime, or if you like, the most recent ones, like the issue of Hezbollah that they went after in Lebanon. We have seen over some 21 months, Israel has bombarded and devastated the whole of Gaza, and still they have to sit down and talk to Hamas. In Iran, the Islamic Republic is not like any of those. It's been in power for almost 47 years. It has come to power through crushing of a mass popular uprising. It has got a variety of different structures within the society, and irrespective of its impasse economically or politically, it is still in power and it has a broad range of apparatus. So the change or regime change in Iran would not take place the same way as regime change by bombing could happen, if you like, even elsewhere. Two, the idea of military action and presence of the armed forces as ground troops was never going to be an issue that could be done in a country which is 5 times the size of France and has got a population of almost 80 odd million people. And therefore, the idea of regime change was changed to one thing else. The regime change was changed to two parts. One was to bring in an alternative, and I mean by the alternative specifically one type of alternative that would actually take a change or handing of the power, one that it is more pro-US, or if you like, in line with Israel, or at least not in opposition to them. Two, banking on a variety of tribal forces that some have been more recently been armed and effectively escalated their presence through the reactionary forces in the region. That was another part. This is from the northwest to the southeast of Iran. And thirdly was the idea of the mayhem. And this was the notion that was taking place. And the right-wing opposition in Iran hailed it. We saw them all in the marches that was against or condemnation of Israel. We saw their flags alongside the flags of Israel standing at the corner, and they were dancing and they were calling for more bombings and hoping, or at least pushing the idea that if the war takes place, the Islamic Republic would be under pressure This is its worst situation, and as a result, it would be open for people to come up and take power. And we all knew, at least insofar as the working class and, if you like, the mass movement in Iran was concerned, that this is not going to be the case. First of all, the bombings would mean devastation. We've seen how the bombings in Syria, Libya, etc. have ended up. Society was not going to sit back and let Iran become what Iraq was at the time or Syria was at the time. They were not the general political situation in Iran, and the consciousness that is existing in the country to a large extent is more on the basis of the left. And when I say on the basis of the left, I mean in general terms, in terms of the expectations of freedom, rights, wanting of the councils, etc. That was widespread. And it's not just a political change, but an economic change that it is being called for. And in this situation, the growing movement that was taking place in Iran was something that the Islamic Republic, just before the situation of this war, was finding itself in a different position. It had to backtrack, it had to give concessions, and therefore, soon as the war took place, immediately after, the idea was that this is going to be devastation. So what a lot of the Western media translated this as, and I mean Western media in terms of general official media, from Al Jazeera to the rest, to the BBC, Sky, and all the American sides, all they tried to say that because of this war, people have rallied around their flag, which was not the case. It was against the devastation that this war would have brought. And that this was what was really happening. And this devastation was something that everybody knew is coming. Everybody knew in a country where it has got problems already in terms of its economy, bombing of some of the infrastructure, bombing of some of the factories, etc., is not going to improve their economic situation. Everybody would be in a worse situation, especially because the currency would be devalued immediately, which it was, and consequently the cost of living goes up, and the situation for everyone would become worse. The protest that took place, or if you like, the idea that took place was that this situation is not acceptable. This had nothing to do with the Islamic Republic or rallying around the flag. It wasn't patriotism or nationalism, but it was the general opposition to this situation which was taking place in Iran. But soon as the war effectively started to escalate, and then immediately after, once the ceasefire has been brought, and it's better to note that there is no peace, if you like, it's just a ceasefire. And therefore the threat of the war is still on there. The immediate response was, insofar as Israel was concerned, insofar as the US was concerned, Islamic Republic was concerned, everybody started saying we are the winners. Everybody could see that the idea of regime change has completely failed. Everybody could see that the excuse of nuclear issue doesn't hold water, whether from the point of view of the non-proliferation treaty requirements, and nor from the point of view of the position of the nuclear issue in the whole region. Everybody knew that's just an excuse, and that's not really the main issue that is actually being tackled in here. And everybody started saying they're the victorious part. But what happened was, out of this, or immediately after the 12 days, every one of these powers tried to actually make the most to show that it has got a better position. The Islamic Republic tried to actually raise the flag of nationalism and patriotism against anybody who actually did anything. Charges of any help would be considered, or any protest against the Islamic Republic could be considered as a rallying aligned with Israel, and therefore that was used. Immediately the laws were changed. Special courts have been set up. The idea that anybody who says anything about the Islamic Republic become an ally of Israel would mean an immediate sentencing and death penalty. The number of imprisonments went up immediately after. Harsh condition in terms of any opposition voices were raised within the country in terms of immediate suppression, militarization in variety of places of general life and workplaces suddenly escalated. And this was the answer that the Islamic Republic had. And they were trying to actually build on this, and still are trying to build on this and spread any form of protest and unity that was in the country. Over the years, one of the things that the Islamic Republic has been doing, and part of the, if you like, a general policy or fascistic policy or racist policies that have been taking place in Iran, has been the notion that the Afghan refugees in Iran are a problem. They are the ones who actually produce problems for us, if you like. This time, Islamic Republic built on that as well. The idea went so far in terms of their policy, went so far as to say, to change this and even put this one in a flag of nationalism as well. The Afghan refugees, under the notion of illegal immigrants, was used this time under the banner of non-Iranians, Iranians and non-Iranians. And as a result, the Islamic Republic passed a law that all of these people who have come from Afghanistan to Iran, several million of them, they all got to be deported. And they have started this. Currently, we are looking at daily something like 20,000 Afghan people from Afghan background are being pushed out of Iran, often without any form of support or any form of provisions. They've been taken out to busloads and taken across and transferred over to Afghanistan, a hellhole that is at the moment there. And this is taking place on a very much broader scale across the country. And what was the general population response was to say, this is not acceptable. In many places, people actually started setting up sections where they started giving refuge and shelter to the people from Afghanistan. And when I say people from Afghanistan, we're not talking about somebody who's been there for 5 months, 4 months. We have people who have been there for 20 odd years. And laws under the Islamic Republic say that if, for example, an Iranian woman marries an Afghan man, because the father is not from Iran, therefore they didn't even provide birth certificates for the children, and even the children couldn't go to school. This has now escalated massively in terms of deportations. And the local people in many areas started to take provision for them and provide shelter for them. And this is exactly the same notion we had during the war. There wasn't any help or any shelter by the Islamic Republic, but it was generally the population itself that was looking after itself. Provision of medical help, etc., grew immensely during this time. And we saw exactly the same thing as it happened during the COVID time or any earthquake or any natural disaster or floods and whatever else. All of these have been the population themselves. And that unity, again, is showing itself today here. And the Islamic Republic is trying to break that down under the banner of non-Iranians versus Iranians, if you like. And this is one of the current situations which is taking place. So immense amount of repression, separation, segregations in many instances, more attacks on women, and also militarization of many workplaces. We all knew that our situation following this war is going to be different. We all knew that any single bullet, and I think I probably have said this in the meetings here before, that any single bullet by Israel or by US on Iran extends and strengthens the Islamic Republic and gives it more excuses to attack. And this has happened. This is literally has happened, and everybody can see it. So in terms of the popular progressive revolutionary movement in Iran, this war was an attack. It did create a dent because in such a situation, it's very difficult or it's at least more difficult to do organization and gathering. Breaking down of variety of structures is something that the Islamic Republic we knew is going to bank on, and more militarization of workplaces we knew is going to actually make our job harder. So now what we have is effectively an additional problem that we didn't have before and we have today. But there is also on the other side, like every other thing, it's a major issue. And major issues means political parties take sides. And one thing which we saw in here was a huge change in terms of recognition of the right-wing opposition, in terms of their hailing and their support and their dancing in the streets, if you like, mainly abroad, in terms of welcoming the attack by Israel. And the idea that they would have enough power to call on everybody else to come and raise another uprising to drop the Islamic Republic with the help of the bombings. This clearly showed their lack of presence within Iran, their immense lack of popularity on one hand, because nothing, as they had said, took place. Two, everybody started seeing them as those who don't care for the lives of the people who are under bombardment, but more of the case that they just want to get themselves to power by any means possible, and the only means possible for them is through mayhem and devastation of the society. And three, they saw how those, if you like, within, like ourselves, like people who were actually saying that our job is to get rid of the Islamic Republic, and that's our job, and the expectation of an alternative from Israel or from US, from that point of view, is not going to be something that people are after, and therefore they would be coming for anything like that as an alternative, was boosted. So we have a recognition of this, and the recognition of the media, the right-wing media that has everywhere trying to portray the right-wing opposition as the only popular opposition, suffered greatly. So that has happened at the same time. This brings us to a current scenario. We still have protests taking place in Iran, especially after the war. The main slogans that we hear in these protests, whether we're looking at the retired and the pensioners, whether we're looking at the teachers, whether we're looking at a variety of workplaces, they are actually pushing forward for one thing. And these are the main slogans that have come out in many of these places. One of them is with regard to the actions that the Islamic Republic and the bosses have taken. They say if there has been a situation where because of the war or because of the situation that has happened, they started non-payment of the wages, non-payment of the due expected wages and bonuses. None of them have been paid. The idea is that everybody says, well, by law, if the person who does the work does not turn up at work without a good reason or for whatever reason in Iran, therefore they won't get paid. This was not the case that the working people were not going to work. The situation was that the bosses decided to all run away. And therefore they have to pay for all the due wages, on one hand. Two, they want an immediate end, and this is again what we see very, very broadly, an immediate end for the cessation of the executions which are taking place to right, left, and center, and the abolition of the death penalty in totality of it. One thing else which we have been pushing forward was to start building some sort of a, if you like, a bloc, some sort of a general opposition to allow, or what Islamic Republic is trying to allow itself to use the situation of the war as another way to take vengeance on the people and generally workers across many different working places. And this is another area which is effectively saying the Islamic Republic is supposed to pay for all of the devastation that has happened in terms of the houses of the people, ensuring that the incomes are brought back in immediately. Extra should be paid for the situation that people are in, and the war cannot be used as a means of excuse for further attacks on their living conditions. And these are the main issues that we have. What I'm trying to say in one word is the protest movement, if you like, the causes because of the situation that everybody was in has not disappeared and has not gone away. The forces that are in power, like in Iran, the Islamic Republic, is using the issue of the war to take vengeance, and this is one thing we're seeing at the moment. Two, the Islamic Republic, Israel, and US have all taken up the pressure of possible extension or continuation of the war or another war taking place. And they're using that atmosphere to crush any form of protest. That is taking place as well. So our work has become, if you like, more difficult from that point of view. But that is a general broad view of what has happened and what is currently taking place in Iran. I'm not going to the idea of all of the talk that they have with regard whether Iran would have negotiations with US, the position that the US has, or if you like, the difficulty that the West has in actually resolving this problem, the situation of isolation of Israel, which has going to have an impact, and therefore it's going to have further impacts in terms of what happens in terms of military actions that might take place. I think that could be something that we could discuss probably later on. But the situation within the country, this is what it is. And each party or if each part is trying to build on this situation to follow their own means. We are doing ours, Islamic Republic is doing his, and obviously Israel and US are pursuing theirs. And that's where we are at the moment. It's interestingly enough that the right wing that is being supported now by Israel is trying to gather the momentum with the rest of especially in Europe. We saw the son of the old Shah being called to talk with Boris Johnson, Michael Farage, having a meeting, and they said they have a closed room meeting in Parliament, and they made it as if he's addressing the Parliament in opposition to Mujahideen, which had traditionally had that position in terms of the West. So that takes place at the same time. But insofar as the general public is concerned, they have actually gone through a huge meltdown in terms of their rhetorics. Thank you. I think I better stop there. I might have taken more than your 25 minutes.
No, well, that was very interesting, Comrade Aman, and I'm sure comrades have got a lot of questions and points